Hey, Real Estate Rock Stars. It is Sarah Denig, and I am coming to you from chilly Indiana. It is so freaking cold here, but I am so excited about today's podcast. We have Kristee Leonard from the Austin, Texas market. Welcome to the show, Kristee.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
So one thing that I thought was really cool when I was, doing a little research on you is the amount of accolades that you have. Like if you were a Girl Scout, your sash would be like full of badges, girlfriend.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. So just to name a few, I mean, 30 under 30, you've been crushing it in Austin, Texas for a long time, been in the business 18 years. So that is pretty impressive. So as we all know, this industry can be hard and it is not for the weak. And we know that, most people don't survive. So kind of tell me about your journey and how you have been able to maintain, so many awards and do so much business and stay at the forefront of Austin, Texas.
Absolutely. So I really like what you said about people. Not everybody stays in the business. I think that's something important to touch on is that I have always been one of these people that if I have the time, I will do it. And
Hmm.
being someone that's been in the business 18 years, I've brought on younger agents. I've experienced where people are like, well, I only work Central Austin or I don't work rentals.
Hmm.
And when I was kind of just going through some of my past sales and past clients, I noticed that my best year in real estate, when
Hmm.
I did over 50 million individually, I was working
Let's
on
go. Let's go.
it feels small to me, so I'm not bragging about that. But what I'm saying is for a lot of agents, individually over 50 million would be a lot and they would be picky. And I was doing rentals when I was selling that volume individually. I do
Hmm.
not, I, now granted, I also think like, if you got to be smart about your business. If you're capped out on time, then you need to
Hmm.
appropriate that time wisely. But what we'll get into, and I think this is important for new agents, is I have a lot of sales and luxury sales because a lot of agents want to know, how do I become a luxury realtor? I have a lot of luxury business that came from working a rental property and working with a tenant. And it's
Hmm.
one of those things that if you have the time, you should not be too good for anything. You should be out there
Amen.
working. And
Hmm.
so, that's how I feel like I've been in the business so long and how I have gotten accolades is because I I started in a state of survival. So, long
Hmm.
story short, I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but my parents got divorced. My mom got into real estate. She didn't have a college degree. It was her only option to try to make the income she needed to make to survive, to pay the mortgage, pay the bills. And my senior year of college, I finished my real estate licensing, moved back to Austin because I was going to school in Florida. I flew to Florida for my test and sold real estate at the same time. And it was either make it or lose the house. And
Hmm.
people need to be put in that position. People can, I found, and especially bringing younger agents on, if your parents are paying your bills and you're just living a comfortable life, you're probably not going to be one of the ones that succeeds. Most of the people that I come across that are succeeding, they were at a rock bottom place where they really had there was no option but to succeed. And I
Hmm.
feel like that's how I've been my whole real estate career has been like, I'm not too good for anything. If I have the time, I'm going to work it because I don't know where it's going to lead. And then
Hmm.
segue into, I was looking through just like some of my notes on going back through my clients. And it's like one of my clients, I did $4 million in sales from leasing some $3,000 property. They had
Hmm.
moved here from California. They needed to reestablish their credit because of the situation of pricing in California. And so, anyways, they could only rent at that time. But then, a few years down the road, credit's better and, they're
Hmm.
buying and selling multiple properties. And I actually have a listing with that client again right now. So, yeah, I mean, I just think that it's surviving in this market is having an old fashioned hard work ethic.
Yeah. I think that's so interesting because, I think it comes down to people's why. Your situation was it was fight or flight, it do or die, let's go. And I think that's very important. Even if that's not your situation, sometimes it's good to adopt that kind of mentality. And there's no other option, and you're going to do this. Whether you took this big chance and quit your job for this and you have a little nest egg, it doesn't matter. You need to teach it like, this is everything to you in this moment. And I think what's so important is that just getting uncomfortable, because if you're in your comfort zone, you're not going to change. That's not where growth happens. So, getting your real estate license and going and grinding and not being too good. Ego's not your amigo, and people got to get over that really fast. Because you never know where business is going to come from. If you show up and you do the work and you impress somebody, they're going to be like, "There's nobody else that you can work with." And business is business. So I agree. If it's a rental that gets you there, whatever it is, and in this changing economy, it's good to diversify and be able to speak on lots of things. Because even if you're in the luxury market, they could have a kid who wants to rent. I mean, you just never know. And they know that you're going to take care of them. So I think that's so interesting and important.
Absolutely. Very
It's
true.
really
I
cool.
agree. You don't have to be technically at rock bottom. You just have to be in a mindset that you're going to commit and give it your all.
Yeah. Yeah. Really cool. And I think it's also, I like what you said about when you are reflecting back. And I think a lot of new agents, it's important. We run so hot sometimes that we don't go back and look, where did that business come from? When was my best year? What was I doing during that time? And really trying to figure that out and then go down that rabbit hole to keep it going. Because it's a snowball effect. It really is.
Absolutely.
And just like doing things like this podcast, it's getting yourself out there. And in real estate, we have to be top of mind all the time or people forget about us. And that's a huge problem for many real estate agents. They do the deal, it's very transactional, and they maybe had a relationship but it ended, it burned out as soon as they close. And I know that you're really good about staying in contact with your clients. Can you speak on some of those tips that you do to stay top of mind?
Absolutely. So when I first got into real estate and I was at Keller Williams and then I got my broker's license. But when I used to go to those
Okay.
classes, at that time, because I'm aging myself, I've been here 18 years in the business. It
You look
was
great,
big.
honey.
It was, thank you. It was big on postcards. So back in that day, it was like send a postcard to your database. Well, fast forward, and I will tell you, I've never been one that's, I know they're effective, but I've never been one that's been great with postcards and consistency. But what I'm segueing to is what I feel is the modern day. You don't need to send your database postcards. You need to be in front of them on social media. It's like
Mhm,
rather than hitting them once a month or however often you might be hitting them, I make sure when I meet someone, it's like I'm trying to add them to all the platforms. So LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, wherever I can find them to
mhm,
constantly stay top of mind. And I
mhm,
feel like that has been a huge free way for my business as far as staying in front of people. Then they also see how I do my business. What do my videos look like? How am I marketing my properties? And
mhm,
so that social media, number one, top of mind. But then also, I use Constant Contact for my email database. And so people are constantly, my database is constantly getting email fires. I have over 28,000 in my email database. Now that's
wow,
comprised of realtors too. I had my assistant go in, like I'm in Austin, but I had my assistant go and pull realtors in Houston, realtors in Dallas, because statistically everybody thinks, number one place we're getting buyers is from California, but it's actually intrastate. So number 1 is from, like, Dallas, Houston, and then, yes, California is number 1 if we go out of the state of Texas.
mhm,
But so, my emails are keeping me top of mind in clients, and then social media. I see a lot of times my clients looking at my stories. So
mhm,
I know that it's effective and I know that it's working, and I just want to come across as the real estate leader to my clients.
mhm,
Yesterday I was at a chamber luncheon. So I did a story about that and about the new high school. And it's just like, And what I've heard over and over again, but I have not been consistent. I've heard it from other realtors. I've heard it from Gary Vee, is like being the mayor of your city, which I feel like that's something that's been said for a long time now.
Mhm,
But the thing is that most people just don't act on it. Or we
mm,
do one video and then we're like, the consistency of sticking with it.
mhm.
So that's what I try to do with my clients as far as staying top of mind. And then I also just try to offer free things of values.
Consistency is like such a it really is what it's all about. And it's like that with anything with life. You know, life compounds and you have to be consistent. And personally, I find that I need to make time for more content. We're doing stuff all the time. If we just recorded some of it, and that's really been an aha moment for me in the last year, hiring somebody to just kind of put together the reels and a day in the life or capture this or capture that. So you have some content to put together because we do so much. We just need to show it. And I'll tell you something so interesting. Since I've doubled down on this probably since summer, um, some of the views are getting like 30,000. And I have found that as I keep being more consistent, Facebook or Instagram they'll send me a message like, you're putting out quality content. Now we're extending your reach. And I'm like, "Oh, that's kinda cool," and that's something that I never did, and I think a lot of agents are nervous to put themselves on the camera. I feel like no one cares, but, take your shot, 100%.
Absolutely. And that's why I'm here right now doing the podcast. I'm
I'm
getting
so
outside
proud
of
of
my
you.
comfort zone.
That's so great. So back to the postcards, I also think diversifying what you're doing. Social media is so great. I also use something called Wise Pelican and I buy neighborhoods. And if I have a listing, I do coming soon, just listed. And I've had 2 calls in the last month of postcards from 6 months to a year ago that they saved. And I was like, really? And you feel like it's not working and it's a lot of money up front. You're like, do I really want to spend $400 or $500 on this? Like, am I going to see the ROI? But I feel like with real estate, it's the same thing. The things you do now, you're going to see in 3 to 6 months. And it's
Absolutely.
wild. And you have to put your nose to the ground and stay consistent and know it's going to happen. It's so hard, go. And I was talking to a newbie about this the other day. You spend your weekend doing all these open houses and nobody comes. And it just sucks because you're like, I could have got so much more done. Well, get you some content, honey. Get that content. Go knock on doors. Show the viewers that you are a hustler and you're going to do the work.
Absolutely. And it's all about just doing it. It's the number of times that you do it. I mean, I have a listing right now that came from an open house. It's just you just have to it's in the number and the volume of how
Mhm.
many you're doing. I mean, there's a lot of agents hustling out there that are stacking them back to back,
Yeah.
doing 2 or 3 on a Saturday. So,
Yeah. And I think that's a great goal, especially getting started. I struggle with open houses at this point in my life because I have 2 small kids and they're in, sports. But, I give people opportunities to hold my open house is open. Sometimes I even pay people because I just want the exposure, and I think a lot of people don't think anything's gonna come of it, but I remember, like, one of my first open house, I was huge and pregnant, and a lady came through and I stayed in contact with her for months. She's a friend of mine now. And I've probably done 6, 7 transactions out of that open house from family members. And so it can feel like you're wasting your time, but you're really not. You got to take a
no.
shot.
Well, and it's goes back to what you said. It can be a waste of time if you're not using your time the best way. But if nobody's
Hmm.
there and you're getting content or you're knocking on doors, meeting neighbors, then you're making something that could have been a waste of time not a waste of time.
Yeah. No, I agree. I agree. So, do you currently have a team or how is your business set up?
Yeah, I would say my flaw is that I like to do everything. And so it took me a really long time to even get a VA. That's how you are? Yes. So I know a lot of coaches push towards like the team structure. That will never be my structure. What I see myself in the future is hiring licensed assistants, and then it's just
Mhm.
they do whatever I need them to do. If I need them to go show one of my listings or show my buyer or just really someone that's licensed to be there to do whatever I need.
Mhm.
That's kind of the future of of my business. And that's where I saw my business when I was doing 50 million a year. I was like, okay, I'm ready to do that. And then the market shifted. So if
Mhm.
I was back there or better, I would do it. But right now I'm just one of these workaholics that I'm like, well, I can do it. I can do it all right
Yeah.
now. So
Yeah.
my VA has been huge. That was it took me forever to let go, and that has saved me so much time. My mom still
Mhm.
jokes about it. I had a realtor that emailed me and he was like, "What, Kristee, are we farmers?" Because I was like sending emails at 3 a.m. And he was like, seriously, like, get a life.
Do you sleep? Do you sleep?
Yeah, do you sleep? I got that a lot from a lot of people. Do you sleep? Which it was true. I was doing everything. I was copy and pasting everything across all social media platforms if I had an open house or a price improvement or whatever. So my VA has saved me a bunch of time
Mhm.
and is worth every penny. So my VA, I would say that's huge. And I know a lot of people that they're just stacking up the VAs,
Yeah.
to scale.
Yeah, I've been through similar things with the delegation process. I found like social media for me is really hard to delegate because I want it to come across as my personality. And I'm very quirky and I want it to be through my lenses. So I struggle with that. However, people like us, it's very good to delegate the things you're not good at. For instance, like when I hired my assistant, I did had her disc profile and I know that I'm a high D, high I. I needed a C or an S, which is somebody who's very structured, very organized. And she compliments me so well. So, like all the back end stuff, I hate getting on the computer. I'd rather be out with people, meeting people, like I'm just social. So, taking that off my plate was huge. Having a VA like look through our city of things that's happening for content, like, hey guys, here's all the pumpkin patches. Here's where to go Christmas. Look at Christmas trees, like all of that stuff and putting it together, just being somebody like the mayor who knows what's going on. And it's so funny because once you get in that position, people start calling you for the most random things. Like, do you think this is a good business club to join? Do you think and I'm like, I don't know, let me look into it. But it's really cool when you put yourself out there and learn what you're really good at and delegate the rest. Then your life opens up and all that headspace that you need, it clears it out so you can focus on the good things that you're good at.
And ultimately be more productive. I mean, that's the only
Right.
way you're gonna grow and through scaling. For me, same thing. Like I would never hire one of those companies that just auto post the same thing to everybody's
Yeah.
page. That no. But what it has been helpful with my assistant when it comes to social media, he always sends me like, these are the photos I'm going to use. This is the description. I approve everything, but I post like everything, if I'm having an open house, a price improvement, etc. And so
Yeah.
those things that are not me in front of a camera, but they're just photos and description, it's been helpful to have him to copy and paste.
Oh, yeah.
But
It
I'm
saves
still
you the
very
time.
yeah.
Where did you find this VA? Are they out of the country or are they local?
So the reason it took me so long to even want to have a VA is because I also felt like I was concerned about security and I was concerned about people that I didn't know having access to different accounts and things like that. I
Mhm.
used a company called Virtue Desk and I don't know how Tom Ferry is affiliated with them, but I did see his name at some point associated with them. And so I was like, okay, I'll check it. I'll look into this. And I really liked their process because they gave me like 5 different VAs to interview and
Oh,
choose. And then even if I didn't like one of those, then, I could interview more. But I felt like it was very professional being able to go through the interview process and find a VA. And then my VA wanted to go back to school. So I got to choose another VA, and my VA, who I loved, actually helped me with the interview process. And then he trained the new VA, and everything was
mhm.
seamless. But so it's been a really great experience. I highly recommend that company. That being said, there is a 30 under 30 who also has started a VA business. His
Really?
name yeah, he is oh goodness, now I'm drawing a blank as to his last name. His first name is Juan, and he did this huge, event where he had, like Dina with Douglas Elliman. I think her name's like Dina Golden Tear or something like that. But he had
Okay.
several like really big names. Some of the guys that have been on like $1 million listing, he put together this whole conference. But so several of the 30 under 30s are using him because his VAs are really trained for what realtors need. And
Mhm.
so it's taking a lot of okay, so his Instagram, just if y'all care to know,
We
is
do.
Juan Goldbar, and his name is Juan Carlos Barinci. But so uh, that was something I was going to look into as well. I already had my VAs, but I learned about this at
Mhm.
a recent 30 under 30 event. And so I thought that was interesting that they're already kind of trained on whatever you might need for the real estate aspect of things.
How did you like, what when you're vetting these VAs, what kind of questions were you asking and what were you, because I think a lot of people are like, "What am I gonna have have them do? And I'm gonna pay all this money, what am I gonna have have 'em do?" So, like, what are some things that you were like, "This is what I need help with?"
So that is I've had my VA for some time now. So asking me what questions I ask them is great. I can't even
Or what
remember.
do you use them
Like,
for? Like, how do
so
you
what
utilize them?
yes, what I utilize him for, you know, it's crazy that it actually takes up so much of this time just really for all the marketing. So, for example, he will put together in reverse prospecting, he'll pull those contacts and put together an email list in constant contact so that I can
Mhm.
send out reverse prospecting emails. And it'll be like, "Hi, Mary, your client reference number blank was just sent this property. It's just listed on the market. We're having an open house this weekend. Please let
Mhm.
them know and send them by." So, reverse prospecting, I had him, as I mentioned, pull realtor databases. So, I had him pull different cities. I had him pull different databases of different groups. For example, I'm a member of the Institute for Luxury Home Marketing. So I had
Mhm.
him put together a database of the luxury realtors across the US. I mean, really the possibilities are open ended as far as what you can get him
Mhm.
to do. What he does on a day in and day out basis is he'll launch my marketing. So, for example, I have a listing hitting the market. So first we'll do the coming soon marketing. So he'll do the coming soon posts on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, TikTok. He'll put together the email flyers. So I use Constant Contact, but I also use Fraser Flyers, which is it's an email flyer, and they're in several cities. I don't know how large they are. It kind of started out
Mhm.
small in Texas and now they've expanded, but that's for agent to agent email marketing. So I have
Mhm.
him now do all of my input of my email flyers and Fraser flyers. Now keep in mind, I'm the one that is authorizing it to be sent. So
Right.
he's inputting everything. I get the proof and then I say yes or no,
Yes.
or if it
Mhm.
needs edits. He is, putting together lists of realtors who have sold in the area. So I like him to pull, for example, if it's the Lake South area, I say, "Hey, I want you to pull all the realtors who have sold a property in the Lake South area in the past year." He'll create a database for that. I also have him create a database of sellers, or well, I say sellers of property owners. So I email the neighbors within a certain radius to let them know that I'm having an open house. So I know that there are strategies on how to have a mega open house and all that. I do not have enough time to go get there early and door knock. Like my schedule is just too busy. So I will email um the neighbors, and I've had neighbors show up from my email flyers from that
Wow.
invitation. I know people also will mail invitations, but again, a lot of times I'm launching things really quickly and there's just not enough time.
Yes.
I might
Mhm.
have a buyer who contracts on a property and now all of a sudden they need to sell their property and we need to get their home on the market
It's
and
go time.
so, but all that kind of stuff, I mean, it's really the sky's the limit on what you can have them do, and it's all that stuff that we put on a list, like, wouldn't it be really cool if I did this, and it stays on the back burner forever?
Yeah.
and I feel like I'm better serving my clients because my clients don't need me to be able to copy and paste something. But
No.
they need their property to be marketed. They don't need to hear like, "Oh, I was out showing buyers, so no email flyers went out, no social media posts,"
Mhm.
But yeah, all of those
Yeah, I
kind of
really like
things
that.
are yeah.
I like to like, I know the Austin market has changed a lot, or so I hear. It's slowed down, and staying in contact with those sellers is so important. And what we utilize is we try to put together a weekly email, and it's kind of like this is what happened, this is how many showings, this is how many views. But I love that because that's one more thing you can add value on that email to show them this is what we're doing to get your house moved. And staying in contact. Like, it's such a good touch too for your clients that you're doing all of those things.
Well, that's a good point. So that's another thing I have him do is I will have him put together a list of everything, like a seller's report for the seller. So I'll have him
Mhm.
go and say, like, this is all the email flyers that went out. These are all the social media posts. So he does that for me as well.
That's awesome. Super cool. I like a lot of the ideas there for the VA, and I think that we could all use that. It's really motivating me to do that. So I like to do some like 5 to 7 type open houses during the week to get people when they're getting off work, because with sports and everything going on the weekends, and then you're not wasting your whole weekend at an open house. It just seems to be a really good in between way to capture some of those neighbors and people getting off work.
And what has your turnout been like for those evening open houses?
Way better, and we'll market it, and I like to do it, especially depending on what the property is and knowing who the avatar is. So, like, if it's gonna be a family and the sun's gonna be setting and it's a boating community, because we have a boating community where I live, I will get it so it's so beautiful sunset over that water and have champagne and, invite those over. On our personal flips, we like to do it too when we're launching them. We'll get, like, a one-man band and some drinks and have it during the week and invite the neighbors over, and we just get so much more turnout than the crazy weekend. And plus, like, then I can be there again, back to trouble giving up control. Then I can be there to really get a feel of people. Like, I really can give the sellers how I really felt, those people, their feedback and all of those things. So I just have more information for them.
Awesome. Yeah, I
Yeah.
definitely need to utilize the evening open houses. I have to say, our open houses haven't been too bad. Nothing has been crazy as far as like how it was before where you'd have like 30 groups or an open house, you're not seeing that. But last
Mm,
Saturday I had 7 groups through an open house and I felt like that was like reasonable for the state of the market that we're in.
that's great. I would be thrilled with that.
Yeah.
7 groups. Awesome. So tell me some more. So over 18 years, if you were to tell your newbie agent brain, just some things like what has really worked for you outside of social media and staying in contact and these niches that you're really into. Can you go into kind of those little details?
Absolutely. So, throughout my real estate career, who my client has changed and segued into different niches. So, one client that I got that really helped too. So, I feel like there are 2 different clients that really kind of catapulted me to the next level because they gave me the ability to get volume, which
Mm-hmm.
gave me the ability to start winning awards. And then I felt like that was name recognition, branding, and that just kind of catapulted my career. So I got a call. I did not know what wholesaling was. Okay. I was a young agent. I hadn't experienced working with a wholesaler, was not familiar with it. I got a call from a wholesaler. He was also new into wholesaling, had gone to different training things, but I got a call from a wholesaler who found me on realtor.com. And now I feel like it's much more prevalent. At the time, this was, I mean, like I said, I've been in the business 18 years. This was at least 10 years ago, if not longer. And so there weren't as many wholesalers
Wholesaling
out there.
companies. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, anyways, he was new to wholesaling. I decided to give it a go. And actually, we did quite well. I personally liked it because I'm all about time efficiency
Mm-hmm.
and he wants to close deals because that's his line of business. It's not like a buyer that's like not even sure if they want a home or not, you know?
Mhm.
It was like he had to close deals to for his income.
Mhm.
And so anyways, I liked that aspect of it. And for me, it was all about like crunching numbers and not out showing properties. So I felt like I could really stack up the contracts and be very time
Mhm.
efficient. So actually, we both kind of learned together through the process because, like I said, he was a new wholesaler, but he
Mhm.
was effective in getting those contracts sold. And so that was, I would say, one of the first things that really got my sales volume to where I started winning awards was
Mhm.
through working with a wholesaler. And long story short, an investor that I had, well, a family of investors that I had met through that wholesaler at the time, they started off remodeling properties and then building properties. Now I have $5 million listings from this client that I met. So people are always like, how do you get into the luxury market? Well, sometimes it takes time. That was like an over
Mhm.
10-year relationship that turned
Mhm.
into that. It wasn't overnight, but that segued me just from working with a wholesaler, working with investors that then turn into builders that segues me into luxury, which
Mhm.
is a whole other niche that I'm known for. I'm part of the luxury league, which is the top 30 luxury realtors in Austin, and that is based on sales over 2 million. So it's based. So your application, you have to meet a minimum sales requirement, and then the sales that you submit are any sales that you've had over 2 million, and that's how they narrow it down to the top 30. But so my point in this is that you might start off working with a wholesaler and then it started to get to be a needle in a haystack, with the market shift and pricing going up. It was a lot
Mhm.
more to harder to find deals where the numbers worked. And that's just kind of why I stopped doing the wholesaling thing, was because it just started to become a needle in a haystack, which also, so another niche that I had, and I haven't even used this website. Honestly, I was going to look to see if it's even still around, but I got connected with another realtor in Texas through Active Rain. And this was back in, a long time ago, back in the beginning of my career. She was connected with a company called American Homes for Rent. I don't know if you're familiar with them, but they're a real estate investment trust out of California. They could literally buy 100 deals a month in Texas if the numbers worked. So they had agents in Houston, Dallas, Austin, etc. I was their pretty much main top performer in Austin. There were a few others, but I was the one that closed the most. But in Austin, we're pricier than Houston and Dallas, like price per square foot basis wise.
Mhm.
Uh, Max, I think I probably got with them where the numbers worked per month was like 10. But still, if you're closing 10 deals a month, that's ranking up your volume to help you go win awards to build that brand recognition to segue into other niches. So, same thing with them. It was like a gravy train for a while. And then it just started to get where the numbers weren't working. And
Mhm.
so then that kind of died off. Also, I got experience through that because one requirement was they wanted us to go help them at the auctions, which I had, as a realtor, had no experience with. So I'm going to, the courthouse steps and learning about the auction process and all that. So it's been a learning career as well, and that has been a way to build relationships that segue into other things. But I really felt like working with, but I would just say a client that is helping you create volume, so whatever that
Mhm.
might be, an investor, a wholesaler, a consistent repeat client is what's going to, I feel like, because you have to get that brand recognition. I think it's also important on a personal level just for confidence, like when you're
Yeah.
going into a listing appointment, competing or whatever. But so
Mhm.
that's kind of what got me on the map to where I started winning like Austin Business Journal top 25 and things like that. And then now my clientele right now, and this is why I'm trying to get outside of my comfort zone, because after my peak year, I've pretty much been like passive as far as I'm active, obviously, in marketing my listings, but
Mhm.
passive in marketing myself, meaning that business just comes to me. Okay. I don't have to do anything. I'm not marketing myself. I'm not buying leads. Business just comes to me. That being said, if I want to take things to the next level, I need
Mhm.
to be getting outside of my comfort zone, and I need to be doing things that to take things to the next level, because my goal ultimately is I want to get to individually 100 million. And if I want to get there, I need to stop being passive in my business. I was
Mhm.
just getting comfortable in my business because it pretty much comes from past clients, referrals, realtor referrals. That's all the majority in my business.
Aaron, who runs this podcast primarily, and has the Rockstar Mastermind, he is in Austin, and he made his first big fortune selling, buying houses on the courthouse steps that were foreclosures. And he's
Oh,
actually written an entire book about it, which is so interesting. I'm sure your guys' paths have had to have crossed at some point. But he ended up going under in that business because Blackstone came in. So what I think is very what like the topic that I really see going through this is diversifying yourself, because when that gravy train of wholesale went dry, if that's all you have, then what's next? And how do you keep it going? Because we're entrepreneurs and we aren't promised any business and we don't get paid till it closes. So I think it's so important to diversify, and it is really good to niche down, and there is niches and riches, but I do think it's good to have your hands in a lot of things. And that's, the portfolio. That's the portfolio way. So when you were working with wholesalers, how did that work? So you were they vetting the wholesale property and then they got it under contract and then you listed it to the masses, or how did that work?
no. So I knew kind of like how they wanted the numbers to work. So I was going through the MLS and crunching numbers, and we were throwing out offers, a lot of offers. And that's another thing too why I kind of got out of it was I didn't want at that time I didn't have the recognition that I have now, but I didn't want to create like a negative name for myself, because a lot of agents, they're not familiar with it, and when they do find out and understand, they're not too happy about it sometimes. So, I but anyways, so as getting into what I did, we would be submitting a lot of offers. And a lot of times it'd be like, things that would work out would be an estate sale that had been on the market a long time. So obviously we're looking for properties that have been sitting a long time. A lot of times they were overpriced properties that weren't on people's radar that we just throw out an offer, and they were negotiable. Okay, so I knew how to make the numbers work. I knew what the investors were looking for. So once we got it under contract, typically we're at such an appealing price that his job, he would go, and he was part of different real estate network investor networks, and he
Mm-hmm.
would have like coffees and lunches with investors and build up this list of investors that were looking to purchase properties. Typically, they were looking to either build or flip. Not a lot of them were really looking to just buy and hold as a rental,
Mm-hmm.
but he had the list of investor buyers. So my job was to screen and find and get the properties under contract. Now, the wholesaler was signing the contract, but I was screening, the MLS and just going through every property. And then he would sell the contract to the end user, and then, they would close.
So let's say a property has been on the market for, 280 days. The property is listed at 400,000. What would your process be digging into that?
So I would be looking at what is the ARV. So also I'm looking for properties that like need to be remodeled, because
Mhm.
typically most of his buyers were looking to either like, is it something they're going to scrape and do a new build on, or is it something that they are going to remodel? But I knew, and it's been so long, since
Mhm.
I worked with him. Like I said, at least probably 10 years. But I knew what they were looking for as far as like what profit they wanted to make, what the remodel costs were on a price per square foot basis.
Okay.
So
So
I
you
would
had
pull
their buy box and then you were matchmaking that buy box to what it was.
exactly. I'd go through and pull the comps and say, okay, this is the after remodeled value. And I would back in work backwards into their
The
cost, their
comps. Yeah.
profit, and this is where we need to be at on purchase price.
So were you having to be boots on the ground or this guy would go physically see the house?
So, well, through the offer process, that's what I was saying I liked about time efficiency was there was no boots on the ground until we got it under contract. So
Wow.
really, it was one of those things that as long as the numbers worked, because we weren't trying to buy it based on comps. We were trying to buy it based on profits. So we're getting it under comps. And when I
Mm,
say based on comps, I mean like comps in its current state. I was
right.
pulling the ARV comps.
Yeah.
But so no boots on the ground until we were under contract. And
Mm,
then once we were under contract in the option period, the investors, whoever he was going to wholesale the contract to, they would want to go see the property during the
yeah.
option period.
That's really so did you put a due diligence in there that you have like a week to do your due diligence on the property?
Yes. So in Texas, we have what's called an option period, which is an
Okay.
unrestricted right to terminate. You don't
Oh.
have to have a reason. You can just terminate. So we have earnest money, which industry standard is typically 1%, but you get that
Mhm.
back if you terminate during your option period. And then you buy the option period. So you stipulate in the contract how many days you want for the option period and what the option fee is going to be, but we could literally do like $100 option fee. So we'd put it under contract with $100 option fee. If he terminates during the 7 to 10 days, however many we put in the contract, lose that $100, get the 1% back. So
That's
and typically, like I said, it's been some time, but I feel like we really made sure we were getting it at a price where the numbers would work for the investors that I really
Mhm.
don't remember anything not making it to closing. I mean,
That's crazy.
he typically was getting now sometimes like they would do inspections and we need to do further
Mhm.
negotiations and things like that. But that was actually great because I feel during that market, that was another slower market at that
Mhm.
time, and, so that was definitely a good client to have.
Yeah, of course. That's really cool. I mean, I'm sure there's lots of communities out there throughout the country where they have something that would work. Obviously Austin has changed so much that it's probably hard to find properties like that, at this point in time, but
Me
super cool. I love it.
me
I love the model. And that's
absolutely,
the thing with real estate, there's so many different avenues, and I think that's what's really, really cool, to explore those avenues and have conversations like this because it just opens your mind to different options. I think what I really love about our mastermind, which you totally should come this year, we should totally come. You should come speak. We would love it. Is once you get out of your hyper local focus and talk to people with, different avenues, it's really cool to see what you can do because Austin and Indiana, they're not competition, so you don't feel like you can just share and your mind is just blown by all these different ideas and things that you could do to grow your business. And that's the whole idea of a mastermind, and that's why it's just so good to get with people and just talk about these kind of things.
absolutely. I'd love to join your mastermind, that would be awesome.
Yeah, I'll get you the info. It's in a couple months, so it will be our fifth year, I think, fourth year, fifth year.
Cool.
But it's been awesome. Well, cool. So what else, as we kind of get to the near of our conversation, what else do you think it's important, or what else would you like to kind of get out there on this podcast?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just to speak, I mean, if we want to kind of go into the niches, so we had gone through the wholesaler, gone through the real estate investment trust, which really got my name out there for brand recognition. So then if we segue into, because I feel like what's really popular is, but agents want to know immediately when they first get in the business, how do I get into luxury sales? I feel like
Uh-huh.
I hear that question quite often, and it absolutely did not happen for me overnight. I hope it happens for them overnight, but it did not happen for me overnight. But
Yeah.
that being said, another thing which social media is so saturated right now, but something that helped me get some luxury listings was using my Instagram. In the beginning, I focused more on connecting with other realtors on Instagram than trying to find buyers on Instagram.
Mhm.
So I had like I got a waterfront listing from a realtor out of Houston that I have still not we still have not met to this day. But it was she had the listing and it was hard with her being in Houston, so she brought me on to co-list, and that all came from Instagram. And then I had another realtor actually in my market that didn't feel like they could best represent their family member who was selling a luxury property. They wanted a luxury realtor. Again, they
Mhm.
found me on Instagram. There this realtor's even in my market, and to this day we have not met.
Crazy.
So I feel like, you know, it's all in presentation as
Mhm.
well. I really feel like, when I have a luxury listing, the way that I market my properties is the way that it should be marketed. And
Mhm.
that's not always the case. And so I feel like also in the presentation is how you're attracting what you want out of your clientele and out of your business. And we already kind of talked about, how rentals segued into luxury listings and
Mhm.
how investors segued into luxury listings. But I feel like there's this mentality of, well, I didn't grow up in a wealthy family, or I'm not a
Mhm.
member of the Austin Country Club.
Limiting beliefs.
Yeah, so limiting beliefs. So then
Mhm.
therefore, I'm not going to be a luxury realtor. Well, I had one luxury sale I think that came from, you know, a family referral. Everything else I got on my own. It was
Mhm.
just all through making connections and time time,
Mhm.
and building your database and growing your database. And I was actually also looking at I think I had one client where I had done like $10 million in business with them, and it started off with selling a $264,000 condo. That is what started and segued into $10 million worth of business. So it
Mhm.
goes back to also not being too good for any price point for a rental, whatever. If you have the time, you should be working it.
Mhm.
But so yeah, those are really the kind of the niches throughout my real estate career.
I love that. You just never know where it's gonna take you, you really don't. Do you feel
Yeah.
like luxury buyers are, or sorry, luxury sellers are a different level of hardness? Do you feel like they're more difficult than, an average price point seller?
Well, okay, so here's the thing. I actually sometimes think that a luxury client, whether it be buyer or seller, sometimes can be easier than even dealing with a rental property. I mean, it kind of depends, but sometimes it can be easier. But that being said, it all depends on the client and
Mm,
also their level of understanding of the market and trust in you. What I will
mm,
say the difference is in representing and I try to have the mindset of I want all of my clients, if I'm going to take a client on, whether it's a $300,000 listing or a $5 million listing, I want my $300,000 listing to get the same luxury service that my $5 million listing is getting. So that's another thing is I feel like you shouldn't take something on if you're not going to give them the service that they deserve. That being
mhm,
said, there are some things in luxury that just are not commonplace in that price point. For example, throwing a party where you have a caterer and you have a band and you have that sort of thing is that here, and I don't know how it is in other markets, but here in Austin it kind of did get to where, before it was kind of like, oh, those things just happen on $1 million listing, But then it did kind of get, when the market shifted and realtors were
Mhm.
really trying every avenue possible to get exposure, I feel like we saw a lot more of those like broker open parties that would
Over the
happen
top.
more. Yeah, and
Mhm.
more over the top. And so that I see more in luxury. I don't see that, so that would be something I would say, sellers, they do want to know that you're giving it your all. And like if XYZ house is doing that, why aren't they getting it?
Yeah.
You wanna make sure that you're giving them every level of service possible. But that being said, I really try to give all my listings regardless of price point, that touch.
Are you going to the showings of your luxury listings?
That's a good point. Yes. So with luxury listings, I'm typically going to the showings. That being said, it's also what is luxury, because I think the price point of luxury varies among markets. Obviously, we're not California.
Mhm.
Um, that being said, we have had some pretty high price point properties, but um, now I would say if a list, and it also depends on the seller, but if a lot of times agents aren't even showing up at a $3 million property. It's like the 4, 5, 6 plus where you're seeing
Mhm.
agents show up to the showings. But for me, it really just depends on uh the preference of the seller, obviously, but then
Mhm.
also the preference of the buyer and the buyer's agent, because
Mhm.
sometimes they're just like, we really want our space, we want our privacy. And it's just how, what is going to serve the property best. But for
Mhm.
the most part, I would say, me personally, it's like I would be present at a $3 million sale. Um,
Mhm.
but if it's $1 million property, that's not even luxury anymore in Austin.
Mhm.
So that agents aren't showing up at that price point. But
Yeah. It's interesting.
yeah,
Just interesting to think about. I've had people ask various price points and I'm like, yeah. I mean, I'm happy to give all the feedback, but it's always like one day in advance and there's something going on the next day, so it's hard. But I think if you had a licensed assistant too, like we were going back to that, that would be a great opportunity to get them in there. So,
w-
well, this has been so great. Where can people find you on the social medias?
absolutely. So it's just my name, Kristee Leonard, on Instagram, and that's where I'm most active. I would say that that's the best place to follow me. So
Awesome. And I'm Sarah Denig at Instagram. And this has been really great. I think there's so many great takeaways, and I can't wait for this one to launch and meet you in Texas soon.
I can't wait to meet you.
All right, real estate rock stars. Thanks so much and have a great day.
Thank you.